Game 2, Kangaroos taking on Port Adelaide, important for both clubs, and we're blessed, Cornsey, Kangaroos coach Brad Scott in his third year.
Oh, Brad, welcome to the program. How are you?
Thanks, Cornsey. Thanks very much for having me on.
Well, that's our pleasure.
It's our pleasure, it is.
We appreciate that. I suspect it's not been a really comfortable place for your players this week. If I can just look at the media reports and gauge your body language from vision I've seen of you on TV and the disappointment from last week, I don't think there's any doubt you laid it right on the line to your players this week.
Yeah, well, we did, and it was a really disappointing performance by guys on the weekend. Not just really because we lost. It's the first time in my coaching tenure really at North Melbourne that I've felt the effort hasn't been at the level expected of North Melbourne players. So, when that happens, that's an extremely disappointing situation and one we're looking to rectify really quickly.
When you say effort, can you define it for us? Is it cracking in? Is it work rate? Is it just effort?
No, I think that quite often effort's an intangible thing, and by effort I don't mean that players consciously go out and not try. I think that we saw evidence in our review of some players just not doing the little things that they would normally do. And and to be honest, I think it surprised a lot of the other players in the room, because sometimes when you're out there playing, you don't realise what's going on around you. And sometimes it can be a subconscious thing, but it's been a real wake-up call for us. And look, I really think it's an aberration, because as I said, in 2.5 years of coaching the Kangaroos, I haven't seen that effort level before.
Brad, another quote of yours we picked up on this week. You said teams have worked you out. I wouldn't have thought that was necessarily a bad thing.
Well, it's a bad thing when they're working you out and beating you. But no, look, I think it's a pretty simple thing. I mean, I think most sides do an enormous amount of research into their opposition, and the plans that the opposition have put into place for us over the last 3 or 4 weeks have worked pretty well, and we haven't adapted to that. And it's a pretty simple message to our players really, and that we've been out pressured and out harassed around the ball, and we've coughed the ball up too easily. So we can fix that pretty quickly. I
was alluding to you handballing a lot more, moving the ball out of the back half. Well, that's what I see. You just got to do it better. That's what I mean. You're not going to change that, are you? If that's how you've locked the boys in, that's your game style and that's your structures to play to, well, you're not going to all of a sudden throw it out. You just got to get them to play and do it better, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I think we did it. The example is against Geelong, we did it really well, and we got a great result that day. Yeah. But it's just simply adapting to the pressure. And I think if you want to play finals football, a free-flowing style of footy doesn't hold up. Now, we want to play a free-flowing style of footy if we can, but if the opposition's pressure is fantastic, then we've got to adapt to that. And, we've coached that really, really strongly the last month or so, and we're really looking to get a change this week.
I don't know how much attention or store you put in statistics, but looking at the statistics across the competition, it is interesting to see that you've got you almost one kick for one handball ratio, which is the worst in the competition, or if you want to call it the worst, it could be the best, given the fact that Melbourne have got the best one. Is the concern for you that you're handballing as much as you're kicking?
Really, I think that you really attack, and your offensive style of play is dictated a little bit too by the opposition. I mean, that number is skewed towards the one handball to one kick, because we played GWS in round 2. We had a 130-point win. They put a number of players behind the ball, and rather than just kick it to them, we had to use our extra players on the way through. So that really inflated our handball numbers. Yeah. But I don't think in modern football that a kick to handball ratio of 1-to-1 is healthy.
Brad, Jack Ziebell wins a 50-50 ball on the wing. He slid in. I thought he made the ball his number one objective. Now, I'm confused. Players look wary. You looked confused. You went bunter in the box. What's the answer? And what are you instructing your players if that happens again with Jack Ziebell on the wing this week?
Oh, well, I think it's a really difficult situation. And look, I mean, we're pretty clear on it. I mean, you don't have to agree with it just because you're clear on it. I mean, I've made my thoughts fairly clear that I think if a player's making the ball his objective, Jack Ziebell's attacked the ball that way since he could walk, and I think a change of rule mid-season makes it very difficult for players to change immediately. Having said that, players are pretty adaptable, so I think they'll work it out. But that one was frustrating because Jack really felt that he didn't do anything wrong, but the AFL are saying that he did do something wrong. So we've got to adapt to that.
But that's not good for the game, Brad. That is not good for the game.
Well,
and bite your lip, because I don't want to get you in trouble. Let me get in trouble, because I'm getting smacked.
Brad, it's all very... Rowy's being really nice to you at the moment, but when he read the reports about you complaining to the umpires and then going...
No, the West Coast game, I thought he saw.
Then you go to Jeff Geese and then go to Adrian Anderson. He's giving you a fair bagging here. Now he's being as nice as pie to you. I understand where you're coming from. I do want to know, do you think you're getting any satisfaction by taking your concerns directly to the umpires and then to Adrian?
No, I want to make it really... I hope Rowie watched on the couch on Monday night.
Yeah, I did. No, I did, Brad. I did.
Because I think that it's really frustrating to me because I haven't spoken to Jeff Geeson in years. I think that this incident, Adrian Anderson's really concerned about two issues at the moment, and that's the sliding issue, and he's concerned about the so-called ducking issue. And so he rang me to gauge my opinion on those two issues. I made it really clear to him in the West Coast game that I thought it was a tackling technique issue on our behalf, and I didn't have any issue with what the West Coast players did. Now, somehow that gets reported that I approached the AFL and went and spoke to Jeff Geeson, and that's just not the case.
Right.
So it's incredibly frustrating because I can understand why people think that I'm whinging and North Melbourne's whinging. If it was the case, I'd cop it, but it's not.
Okay. Brad, well, I have to apologise because I did see you on the couch and you did word it like that. Now, last week I did call you, didn't I? I said, gee, Brad Scott, unusual for him to be in the media all the time, ducking and sliding and having a crack and whinging and sooking, and I did say it. So I take it back, Brad. You can smack me between the eyes, but you did clear it up on the couch.
But it was reported, Rowie, so I understand that. But sometimes, as good as you guys are in the media, sometimes they get things wrong.
Don't say it. Hey, Brad, McIntosh, is he out? And if he is, I reckon Goldstein could have a ripper this week if he's going to be your number one ruckman and do the greater workload.
Yeah, McIntosh is out, unfortunately. His knee hasn't come up. So, Goldie will go it alone, but it's not a role that's unfamiliar to him. And, we're really looking for him to get back into some really good form. He's had a great week on the track, and he's a very capable player. So we're really confident he can get the job done, but hopefully Hamish will be back soon.
I've watched Lindsay Thomas for a few years now, and I think we're all really excited by him and would share the frustrations that you've shared when he doesn't kick goals that he should. How to handle that's really tricky because you don't want to load the guy up psychologically anymore. But it seems this week that you've chosen to do that. You've actually laid it on him that if he doesn't kick goals, he's not doing his job properly, despite the fact he kicked a couple last week. Did you think long and hard about how to handle that and the sort of pressure that he would feel if his coach goes public with it?
Yeah, I think there's no way you can replicate the pressure that Lindsay feels in front of goal at the moment. But I'm a pretty strong believer that and I like to think I'm a really supportive coach of my players and really have their best interests at heart. But at the end of the day, my job is to coach North Melbourne to winning games. And, we're, like every side, we're about playing successful footy in finals, and we want to get there as quickly as possible. And the bottom line is that we've been doing an enormous amount of work with Lindsay, and I think he's a really capable player, but he's got to be able to withstand this pressure. So by deliberately putting more pressure on him, I want to see if he can stand up to it. Because at the end of the day, it's really going to be up to Lindsay. And if he can't stand up to that pressure, then unfortunately, as cold and as callous as it sounds, well, maybe he's not a player for us.
Bang, caught that. Brad Scott, coach of the Kangaroos. They take on Port Saturday afternoon at Amy. How do you assess Port this year, Brad? Do you think they've improved?
I've got no doubt they've improved. I think they've been a little bit harshly treated. I've watched them pretty closely, and people have got very short memories. I go back to round one where they really beat St Kilda quite convincingly around the ball, and I think everyone after the weekend are saying that St Kilda's now a contender. Well, in that round one game, Port, dominated in the clearances. I think they won a contested ball by 25. So they're a very capable side. And I think their structure is looking quite good from the goal to goal line. So they've got some really talented players in the midfield. So we know they're capable. We know their efforts increased and they've improved, and we're going to have to counter that.
Well, they're going to do to you what you want to do to them, cause the turnover, Brad. So it's going to be a game of who makes the least amount of mistakes under pressure.
Yeah, it often is. And again, back to, both sides aspire to move up the ladder. And for that to happen, you're going to have to withstand pressure and reduce the error rate. So I think you're right. Least amount of mistakes will probably win the game.
You're 11th, Brad. Can you make it?
Oh, well, look, we've had a better start this year than we have the last two, and we've missed it by percentage, finishing ninth 2 years in a row. So I think it's very, very early in the season to be making predictions, but I think that our best is capable. We've shown that against good sides this year, so we've just got to improve a little bit and get a bit more consistent.
Well, Brad, look forward to you coming over here, taking on Port Adelaide. I am so sorry I called you a sook. You can smack me between the ears next week.
No, it wasn't quite as bad as that.
No, it wasn't as bad as that. But you brought it up, so I might as well open up to Brad. Gosh. Brad, all the best. From afar, we love what you're doing with the Kangaroos. It's going to be a cracker. Port Kangaroos, Saturday afternoon at Amy. Gee, I tell you what, they want to be a big crowd there. Brad, thanks for your time.
Appreciate it, guys. Always good.
Well done. Coach of the Kangaroos, Brad Scott.